participants, and welcome to this webinar on rejuvenating defense production and exports from Eastern India today. It's a pleasure and privilege for Bharat Chamber of Commerce to partner with the Department of Defense Production, Government of India, to host this seminar, this webinar today, which is the 7th promotional webinar for DefExpo 2022. Bharat Chamber of Commerce has been in the defense sector, promoting the defense sector for the last 3 years, and from the eastern region. This has been a major regional chamber which is engaged in this activity and is actually taking this in the front run. Today's session will be addressed by a lot of important speakers. Let me have the pleasure of introducing them. The welcome address at the outset will be delivered by Mr. Ramesh Kumar Saraugi, President of Bharat Chamber of Commerce. This will be followed by a promotional video on DefExpo. Thereafter, we would be having the introduction of theme by Ayudh Bhushan, Dr. Rajiv Chakravarti, who's the chairman of the Defense Subcommittee of Bharat Chamber of Commerce. We would also be privileged to have the special address by Air Chief Marshal Arup Raha, PVSM, AVSM, VM retired, who is now the advisor of the Defense Subcommittee, Bharat Chamber of Commerce, and has been one of the main backbones of the defense sector activities of Bharat Chamber of Commerce at the initial stages. This would be followed by another important presentation on the industry perspectives by Mr. Sitaram Sharma, Mentor Defense Subcommittee, who is also the immediate past president of the chamber, and it was under his leadership that we ventured into the defense sector activities. Thank you, Mr. Sharma, for venturing the chamber into this sector, which is becoming important day by day, and we would love to have the association of the Defense Production Department in our activities in the near future too. We would be having another important presentation on the Navy sector by Rear Admiral Amit Bose, VSM retired, member, Defense Subcommittee of the Chamber. Last but not the least, we would be having a summing up by our Senior Vice President, Mr. N.G. Khaitan, who would be joining virtually. Thank you, all our guest speakers, and may I now have Mr. Ramesh Kumar Saraugi, President, to deliver the welcome address.
Air Chief Marshal Sri Sharma, Rear Admiral Amit Bose, retired, Sri Das, members of the chamber, guests and friends. I welcome you all to today's webinar entitled Rejuvenating Defense Production and Exports from Eastern India, organized by the Chamber in partnership with the Ministry of Defense, Government of India this afternoon. It is indeed a matter of great privilege that today's webinar is being live streamed on YouTube by the Ministry of Defense as a precursor to the DefExpo 2022, scheduled to be held next month. At the outset, I would like to extend a very warm and hearty welcome to our panel speakers. We have amongst ourselves Ayudh Bhushan, Dr. Rajiv Chakravarti, IOFS retired, Chairman Defense Subcommittee, Air Chief Marshal Arup Raha, PVSM, AVSM, VM retired, Advisor of the Defense Subcommittee, Rear Admiral Amit Bose, DSM retired. Friends, before Dr. Chakravarti shares his observation on the theme for today's discussion, I would like to make a brief submission on the export potential of Eastern India, with special focus on defense production. I would just like to recall that in one of the Chamber's earlier programs, Sri Dharmendra Pradhan, former Union Steel and Petroleum Minister, remarked that about 45% of India's population resides in the eastern region. It is needless to mention that the most populous part of a country has the dual potential of driving both aggregate demand as well as supply. In almost all of our earlier programs on defense production, panel speakers representing the armed forces have pointed out that demand for every known item exists in the defense sector as much as they are required by the civilians. The government's new offset policy and export leads floated by foreign countries reveal the fact that every workshop, factory, be it small or micro, can avail an equal opportunity to supply items, provided that the right procedure is followed and complied with. The Chamber has been therefore making its most sincere efforts in upholding the potential of the eastern states, especially West Bengal, which already enjoys a comparative advantage on a wide range of products like iron and steel, textiles, leather, plastics, light engineering, auto parts, utility chemicals, etc. The Chamber's diverse membership base contains pioneers from all these sectors, and I am certain Sri Sitaram Sharma will briefly mention about their expertise in his address. The Chamber has devoted itself in widening the scope for the industries, especially the MSMEs in the eastern region, through their participation in defense production. In the last few years, the Chamber has reached a few important milestones in this regard. Firstly, the Chamber has established a Defense Sector Facilitation Center at its premises for hand-holding prospective MSMEs interested in defense production. The Facilitation Center was inaugurated by the former Defense Secretary, Dr. Ajay Kumar, and currently functions under the tutelage of seasoned professionals like Ayudh Bhushan Dr. Chakravarti, Air Chief Marshal Arup Raha, retired, and Rear Admiral Amit Bose, retired, who are capable of guiding the MSMEs with an end-to-end provisions in matters of participation completely free of cost. I would request MSME participants from Eastern India willing to venture into defense production to get in touch with our executives for any kind of assistance. I assure you that free consultations will be provided by our experts in resolving your queries. Secondly, in accordance to the newly launched scheme for promotion of MSMEs in defense production and exports by the central government, the Chamber has been partnering with the department for conducting outreach programs in Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities. Two of such programs have already been conducted at Durgapur in Paschim Bardwan and at Kharagpur in Paschim Mednipur district of West Bengal. In this context, the Chamber has garnered positive response from a large number of entrepreneurs and has received requests for conducting more of such programs in various districts of the state. We actively look forward in organizing more outreach programs once the virulence of the third wave of the pandemic subsides. Lastly, members who have enlisted themselves as beneficiaries of the Chamber's Defense Facilitation Center frequently receive export leads disseminated by the Export Promotion Cell of the Department of Defense Production. The Honorable Prime Minister has envisaged that India should reach a target of US $1 trillion in exports by 2025, which includes exports worth US 5 billion in aerospace and defense goods and services alone. This dream can only turn into a reality if the entire nation can consistently contribute to the growth of defense exports by minimizing interregional imbalances. The eastern part of India is still behind its peers when it comes to defense manufacturing and exports. In spite of significant business potential and other comparative advantages over raw materials and logistics, we are yet to create a defense manufacturing hub in this part of the country. The Chamber aspires to make this a reality with the hope that our next DefExpo be held somewhere in eastern India. Before concluding, I am delighted to announce that Bharat Chamber of Commerce has been enlisted as one of the conducting fora for seminars in the afternoon sessions of the DefExpo on 11th March 2022. Panel speakers representing the chambers will deliberate on the pricing strategy for defense exports, how India can acquire a competitive edge over her peers. I would request the participants for making it convenient in attending the aforementioned seminar scheduled to be held at hall number 1 at 14:30 hours on 11th March 2022 at the DefExpo venue in Gandhinagar, Gujarat. Eastern scripture appears to be a metaphor for things of God. The sun rises each day from the east, and the sun is a symbol for God. So the Defense Ministry should specially consider the rise of East again. Now I would request the Ministry to run the promotional video. Now we'll have a promotional video by the Ministry, and with these words, I conclude my welcome address. Thank you. Now, I would request Ayush Bhushan, Dr. Rajiv Chakravarti, to deliver his speech.
Thank you, Mr. Ramesh Kumar Sarogi, President, Bharat Chamber of Commerce. Air Chief Marshal Arup Raha, PVSM, AVSM, VM. Mr. Sitaram Sharma, Rear Admiral Amit Bose. Mr. N.G. Khaitan, Senior Vice President. And Mrs. Keka Sharma, Secretary General, BCC. I must start by thanking Minister of Defense for giving this platform to us, and especially thanks to all the distinguished panelists here today. India has already set for herself a target of achieving a turnover of rupees 1.7 trillion in defense goods and services by 2025, and a target of achieving rupees 35,000 crores worth of export of defense goods and services by 2025. Now, record shows that India has exported military hardware and system worth rupees 35,777 crores in the last 7 years. While the target for turnover of defense goods and services for 21-22 is rupees 90,000 crores, the actual achievement as on 17-12-21 is rupees 34,384 crores. Moreover, against the target for defense export for 21-22, which is 10,000 crores, the achievement as on 8th February 22 is 5,448 crores. Achievements by far are modest, especially when viewed in the context of the COVID situation. It is hoped that by 2025, the country would be able to achieve the above targets without any difficulties. However, in order to ensure so, other regions of the country which are having rich industrial defense base and natural resources, including human skills, need to be integrated in the plan for making India Atmanirbhar in the production of defense goods, systems, and services. So let us go back to history to understand the issue. From the historical statistics prepared by the world-famous British economist Angus Maddison and published by OECD, we learn that in the 1st century AD, India was the world's largest economy with 32.9% share of worldwide GDP. In the year 1700 AD, India's share was 28% of world GDP. During that period, the share of the eastern region amongst all the regions of India was around 25% of the India's GDP. The copper or tamra mined in Ghatshila, now in Jharkhand, were exported to many East Asian countries, including countries of Far East, through the Tamralipta port, situated near Balasore of Odisha. Even today, almost 2,500 years later, 2,500 years later, these copper mines are active and they are mined by Hindustan Copper Limited, a PSU under Government of India. The 18th century was marked in India by the breaking up of the Empire of Delhi, the progress of the Marathas, the wars between French and English, and the final triumph of the East Indian Company. Among the factories established by the East India Company for carrying on their trade, all were in the eastern region of India. One was in Hooghly and the other one at Kashim Bazar. In the year 1700, the factory at Hooghly was transferred to Calcutta, then a new British settlement and destined shortly to become the capital of British India. The richness of natural resources and skill of people attracted the officials of East India Company so much that after their victory in the Battle of Plassey in 1757, they, in the year 1765, got conferred on them by the Empire of Delhi the provinces of Bengal, Bihar, and Orissa, when Assam was a part of Bengal before it was separated as Northeastern Frontier Agency in 1874. In order to protect their several factories established all over India, East India Company drew up a military policy and subsequently a defense production policy. As with the territorial expansion, the needs of the growing army could not be adequately met with supplies from London. It constructed its first gunpowder mill in Bombay in 1669, and by 1741, the powder manufactured in this mill was considered superior than the quality of powder imported from Europe. With the establishment of military board in 1786 at Fort William, the emphasis was laid on indigenous production of gunpowder, cannons, and gun carriages. Gun foundry was established and several pieces of brass ordnance cast in eastern India were sent to England for examination of a committee of artillery officers at Woolwich, and who after inspection pronounced the workmanship and finish superior to those of the Royal Arsenal. The quality of craftsmanship and skill of international standards of workmen engaged in defense production in eastern India came to be recognized by Britain. Even one of the factories of East India Company situated in the eastern India was the first to manufacture steel in India. By 19th and 20th centuries, Eastern region had already attained a preeminent position in the history of ordnance production in colonial India, and it remained so till the end of the First World War. The superintendent of the gun foundry of a factory situated in eastern India was the only appointment, except that of the Surveyor General of India, whose duties extended to all the presidencies of colonial India. With the Japan participating in the Second World War, Britain decided not to build any ordnance factories further in the eastern region. However, they allowed the Controlling Munition Board office to remain in the eastern region. Although following that policy in colonial India, many munition factories were built in various parts of India, but eastern region was left high and dry. Even after independence also, the administration of all munition factories spread all over India continued to be controlled from the headquarters office of Eastern India, although the number of munition factories established in the eastern region after independence were only 2 in comparison to many established in other regions. As munition factories spread all over India, was split into 7 central public sector undertakings very recently. On 1st October 21, when the Ordnance Factory Board was corporatized, Eastern India could only boast of 6 such factories. There are hardly any DRDO labs in Eastern region which can fuel innovations and provide technological support to the private sector in their endeavor to enter the defense sector. With the creation of 7 CPSUs by splitting OFB, the headquarters of these 7 CPSUs went outside the eastern region. Thus, the eastern region has lost its preeminent position in the manufacture of defense production in India. It is generally agreed that eastern India provides the strategic depth along the industrial base required for defense production in India. Eastern Indian states like Jharkhand, Bihar, Odisha, and Bengal are mineral rich compared to other states of India. Moreover, the easy availability of cheap, skilled manpower provides an added advantage to the manufacturers of defense products in India. Eastern India is a gateway to the other Southeast Asian countries and Far East, Export of defense goods to other countries from eastern India through land routes and high seas would be cheaper and more competitive. It is recognized that defense production is a highly specialized sector, having full of complexities and challenges. Products have to be safe, reliable, consistent, and capable of operating under varying terrains as well as climates and in extreme conditions. Accordingly, the technologies applied, which cover a wide spectrum of engineering, metallurgy, chemical, textile, leather, and optical technologies, etc., have to ensure high quality and productivity, apart from meeting the primary objectives of achieving Atmanirbharata. Moreover, defense is not like IT sector or any other sectors. In defense, the government is the major buyer. So people will invest linked to government procurement decisions on prevailing regulatory policies and on several steps being taken by the government in the manufacture of defense goods in India. For fueling defense manufacture and export from eastern India, the first and foremost action required from Government of India is to recognize the importance of the region in supporting Atmanirbharata. This recognition may come if a defense corridor connecting Durgapur, Dhanbad, Midnapur, and Ghatshila can be declared as it has been declared for the Kanpur corridor, the UP corridor, and that of the Tamil Nadu corridor. Moreover, following actions are required when we see the latest defense budget, latest union budget. In the 22-23 union budget, a total of rupees 5.25 lakh crores has been allotted to the Defense Ministry, and which is an increase of rupees 47,000 crores from last year's allocation. Out of it, rupees 1.52 lakh crores has been allocated for the capital acquisition to modernize the armed forces. Government thrust remain in the indigenization for the defense sector, as 68% of capital acquisition budget, that is rupees 1.24 lakh crore, is earmarked for the domestic industry to promote Atmanirbharata and reduce dependence on imports of defense equipment. This is up from 58% in the last fiscal. Private industries from Eastern region who are interested to participate in the defense production and eagerly waiting so are required to be involved to take the advantage of this increased allocation for indigenous capital acquisitions in the interest of Atmanirbharata. This year's budget also lays thrust on the R&D by reserving 25% of R&D budget for startups and private actors. Though not specific to defense, the fund is expected to contribute in building capability, especially in advanced technologies and defense startups ecosystem. Thus, defense R&D will be opened up for industry, startups, and academia. Budget allocation encourages private industry to take up design and development of military platforms and equipments in collaboration with DRDO and other organizations through SPV model. Further, 5% of universal service obligation fund the budget proposes allocates for R&D and technology upgradation. In the proposed Eastern India Defense Corridor, world-class institutes like IIT, Kharagpur, etc. Can be utilized in close collaboration with DRDO and private industry where private industry would be able to play an important role in the development of advanced technologies for defense and for dual use purpose. Since there is a lacuna or there is the DRDO's establishment in the eastern region is not prominent at all. It is the eastern region wants that DRDO should hold exhibitions in eastern region states at least twice in a year to showcase their proven technologies that they have developed and which they would like to give it to the private sector for mass manufacture. Moreover, a testing center for carrying out all types of tests of input materials required for defense production need to be opened in a eastern region state capital by DGQA, which can be easily accessed by all who would be entering in the defense production sector in eastern region. There are many industries and industrialists in the eastern region who are interested to represent the products manufactured by the defense, now the OFB side, now the 7 defense PSUs. But because of the split of these OFB into 7 defense PSUs, the initial opportunity of getting that authorization from OF board from a single point has gone. The authorization of representing OFB in the matter of selling OFB manufactured products world over was earlier available at a single point from OFB. Now, as understood, this authorization is required to be taken from 7 CPUs whose headquarters are situated far away from eastern region. Hence, it is felt that Directorate of Ordnance and Coordination Office of Calcutta, which is the ministry's office, may be made the nodal center for all 7 CPSUs for furnishing the authorization. If required, Directorate can consult the concerned CPSUs, being their controlling ministry. In that case, it would act as a single window for authorization for obtaining orders for export of 7 CPSUs products. Mainly, it is the ordnance and ammunitions, especially the ammunitions which are a worldwide market for exports. And if such opportunity is made available through the Directorate of Ordnance and Coordination Office of Calcutta, it is quite likely that the total defense export will definitely increase from the eastern region and for India, and will be able to achieve the 35,000 crores target by 2025. But last but not the least, we want from the eastern region that the Ministry of Defense should be the single point nodal agency to settle any issues relating to opening of a business in the defense business, in the matter of export, in the matter of getting authorization, etc. So that all the issues relating to defense businesses can be settled at one level. So what is important is that if we can rejuvenate the defense production in eastern region, our target of production turnover of rupees 1.7 trillion and that of the target of 35,000 crores by 2025 be able to be achieved. It is hoped so. And we are thankful for our Honorable Prime Minister for giving this call of Atmanirbhar Bharat and for the budget, proactive budget in making Atmanirbhar a step for achieving our indigenization program to the fullest extent. So this R&D advantage in the budget would be definitely taken by the eastern region industries, and these would be a great support from the ministry. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Now,
Thank you, Dr. Chakraborty. May I now request Chief Marshal Arup Raha to deliver his special address.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The subject of this DefExpo webinar, that is dealing with rejuvenating defense production and exports from Eastern India, has been very well explained by Dr. Rajiv Chakraborty, my previous speaker, who is a former, very senior officer from the IOFS. Through the historical perspective on the past strengths and capabilities of this region, the Eastern region, in the field of defense production and exports, in terms of strengths and capabilities, and over so many decades it has flourished. He also brought out the gradual decline and the shrinking of the capabilities in this field, in the region, and the present environment, which I feel is very, very static. I'm going to deal with the aviation industry, but before that, I would like to go into certain concepts about defense manufacturing practiced all over the world and the lessons that you've learned from them. And in aviation industry, I would focus on its current status and what steps could be taken to integrate Eastern India, especially Northeastern region, to be a bulwark in aviation industry and defense industry as a whole. So let me start by stating a few points on military industrial complex, MIC, and defense industry in general all across the world in identifying the underlying issues related to India's capabilities in this field. Firstly, we all must accept there is a huge connect between wars and conflicts and the economic development of a region or a state or a nation. World War I and II were mostly fought in Europe and Asia Pacific amongst the colonial powers then, and the US joined in later. Industrialization peaked between these two great conflicts or wars, and this peak was sustained during the Second World War and post-Second World War during the Cold War period as well. Technologies were developed very rapidly through intense research and development. Since it was the need of the hour, it was for the sovereignty of the nation and freedom of people. War-waging capabilities improved exponentially, and by the time the war ended, barring the US, most powerful nations were in ruins and totally devastated. But within the next one decade, post-World War II, these nations rose again from the ashes to become economic powerhouses or leading economic giants in the world. This transformation was based on application of dual-use military technologies in civil and commercial fields. These military technologies were developed during the wartime period and subsequently. This resulted in rapid economic growth, development, and improving the standard of living of the people in these countries. Advanced technologies which go into construction of warships have been used for building merchant ships, oil tankers, cruise ships, vessels, seagoing vessels, etc. Similarly, aviation technology, which evolved rapidly and are state of the art in nature, have been used to manufacture passenger, cargo planes, helicopters, etc. Similarly, missiles and rocket technologies have been put to peaceful use to launch satellites, space travel, etc. Information technology, artificial intelligence, cyber capabilities, robotics, communications of the latest generation, high-speed data transfer, drones, UAVs are the latest technologies which are being extensively exploited and used by military as well as the civil sectors. Similarly, nuclear technology are being used for generation of power or electricity, propulsion systems, engines, and in the field of medicine and agriculture. So what I want to highlight is that India has missed the first industrial revolution which took place in the 18th century or so, and that time we are under the British rule. But we also missed the second industrial revolution, which I just described during the First and Second World War and subsequently Cold War era, while India contributed substantially with manpower and resources, raw material for the Allies, especially UK, to fight this war. There are a lot of soldiers who were killed, became martyrs. But the technologies that were developed were not shared with us. We are not privy to that. So we missed the second industrial revolution as well. But the third revolution, which is not industrial revolution, but which is technological revolution, which is taking place now, it's progressing very rapidly. India is going to be a leading player because we have the skills, we have the human resources, we have the materials, and we have the knowledge. Therefore, if we have a concerted, focused policy by the nation or the governments and the industry, I'm sure India can lead the nations in this third, I would say, technological revolution. Secondly, MICs, that is military industrial complexes, flourished in the US, USSR, and Western Europe. Their economies thrived on the sale of military hardware. Arms industry became very powerful, and they control economics of the world and, of course, governments in many, many powerful nations. Today, there is peace and tranquility in Europe, barring the aberration of Ukraine. I think that problem will resolve very peacefully very soon. The demise of USSR and the Warsaw Pact, should have seen the end of NATO as well, which did not happen. NATO's role and utility is being questioned by everyone in the world, including the partners in Europe. The Europeans are reluctant to invest in NATO. In fact, they are drawing down the sizes of the defense forces. The demand for military hardware is diminishing all across the world, and the survival of MICs of rich countries, European countries, US, is at stake. Foreign armament manufacturers are keen to set up shop in India, making it a sort of manufacturing and MRO, maintenance, repair, and overall hub of the entire Asia Pacific region. These are the ground realities today. And it may be good opportunity to obtain genuine transfer of technology and involve these big players in our indigenous projects, making good the gaps that exist in our indigenous capability so that we can accelerate the progress of all these defense-related projects. Thirdly, India's neighbors, especially immediate neighbors like SAARC or South Asian nations, extended neighbors, that is ASEAN or Southeast Asian nations, as well as African nations, are looking forward to India for supplying military hardware and MRO facilities. Their requirements are small, which can be easily met by India, and obviously they can depend on India for providing MRO facilities of the equipment that they buy from India. India can export fighters, helicopters, missiles, radars, UAVs, transport aircraft in the future, and many other things. However, the pricing has to be friendly. It has to be financially viable for the customers. We must ensure good quality, reliability, and high serviceability of the equipment that is sale. This is important so as to enhance the customer confidence in Indian goods. Therefore, as and when India plans to create more manufacturing facilities, MRO infrastructure for inducting new equipment or enhancing the production rate of various other equipment already being manufactured, my recommendation would be that most of these infrastructure should be built in Eastern India. Because of its geographical proximity to Southeast Asia and SAARC nations, it will usher in economic development of the northeastern region. And we know that India's Act-East policy would be successful if our northeastern region becomes the launch pad for connectivity commerce and trade, including defense manufacturing and MRO facilities. Fourthly, India requires whole of the government approach in developing indigenous capabilities in both military or defense production as well as civil application of these technologies. To give you an example, civil aviation and military aviation, these are looked after by MOCA, Ministry of Civil Aviation and Ministry of Defense. But assets in aviation as a whole, in general, use the same technology. Development of metallurgy, like special alloys of steel, aluminum, titanium, composites for aerostructures. Aircraft systems like fly-by-wire control system, hydraulics, pneumatics, electronics, radio, engine, propulsion systems, avionics, instrumentation, all these are common technologies for civil aviation as well as military aviation, production. I am truly not very aware of the effort that is going on, I'm sure it is on by the government of India to work in a coordinated and integrated fashion to develop these technologies for use in production of fighter aircraft, transport aircraft, helicopters, as well as commercial planes. My, of course, impression is that as a nation, we tend to be happy to just improving airport infrastructure, passenger amenities and facilities, and connecting tier 2, tier 3 cities and towns with tier 1 cities by building airports, etc. But I think we need to think more strategic. We need to achieve strategic autonomy even in civil aviation, because we are not manufacturing commercial aircraft indigenously as yet. By 2030, the commercial aviation sector will have more than 400,000 aircraft in the world. See the magnitude of the market and, of course, the MRO thereafter. Why are you still purchasing thousands of aircraft for our airlines, civil airlines, from external sources? Boeing, Airbus, etc. Why not develop this capability ourselves? We need to think about it. Similarly, in shipbuilding, for civil and commercial use, and for the Indian Navy, I think there is a need to work together in a similar fashion, that is whole of the government approach, combining an integrated approach by all the concerned ministries for research and development and production of equipment. This can be replicated in many other fields. It will take a lot of time to explain all that. But as far as aviation sector, and there is very little, frankly speaking. The IAF is the main, source of aviation-related activities in the eastern sector. There are about 15 odd air bases, which positions fighters, transports, helicopters, radars, missiles, etc., and they operate them regularly. There are surveillance radars and communication units all across the eastern region. There are base repair depots and equipment depots in this region to provide spares and aggregates for servicing of equipment, but none of them are major. The MRO facilities of the IAF for servicing its equipment and overhauling its equipment is very, very minor in this region. Most of the equipment that is operated in this region go out of this region for MRO. So that, I think, needs to be corrected. Similarly, civil aviation, several airfields are there. There are a lot of joint user airfields, JUA, with the Air Force and AAI. Many flights operate daily in the region, but there are no major aviation hubs except most probably Kolkata and maybe to a certain extent Guwahati. So this needs to improve. MRO facilities in the civil aviation sector is almost negligible in this sector. As was mentioned, DRDO has got no labs of significance in the eastern region. HAL has one huge factory in Koraput in Odisha, which is the engine division, and it license produces thousands of engines and repairs them and overhauls them. Nothing is done indigenously. HAL has an establishment in Barakpur for a very small establishment for overhauling light helicopters. So overall, you see that Eastern and Northeastern region has not found salience or prominence in defense production, DPSUs, DRDO activities, MRO of civil aviation. So there are many, remedial measures which we need to institute, and most of it will be shared by central government, state governments, the industry, private sector players, and of course, chambers of commerce. I think the central government should look into launching a workable policy on aerospace and defense sector for production and development of infrastructure. It needs to set up MRO infrastructure for the IAF and the Army in the region, for the aviation equipment, and the Civil Aviation Ministry should ensure that MRO facilities comes up in a big way in the Northeastern region or Eastern region. DRDO and HAL needs to set up their labs and production hubs in this region. Government must encourage big players to create infrastructure, try and attract OEM for strategic partner programs with big Indian players. And there is a need for an impetus to integrate academia, industry, IITs, and chambers of commerce in this regard. There is a need to improve through government effort to improve, the infrastructure of better quality for connectivity and communications in this region. State governments need to play a very important role as a facilitator in acquisition of land, power supply, and favorable tax laws, security, etc., to attract private industry in the region. I think India has the potential to be the third largest aviation market in next 5 years' time and a global MRO hub. But today, India addresses only 2.5% of MRO market. So there is a huge scope, huge opportunity for development of aviation industry and defense industry, not only in India, but also specifically in the eastern region of the country. I'll stop here and I'll now request Sri Sitaram Sharma, the former president of Bharat Chamber of Commerce, to speak on industry perspective. Thank you, Jai Hind.
Thank you, Chief. It's very difficult to speak after the Chief has spoken. His knowledge is vast and always hit the point. So thank you once again, Chief. Friends, President Ramesh Sarauki already elaborated particularly about the various initiatives taken by Bharat Chamber of Commerce in defense sector. I was a humble contributor in this, and when I took this initiative, I had huge apprehension, and I didn't know whether we'll be able to achieve anything or not. But it was largely because of my colleagues. Chief is here. We have Aviation Bhushan with us. They all came forward and contributed in a big way to make this initiative successful. I was really privileged and honored because when I interacted with the Ministry of Defense, I got huge support from them. Practically, the hand-holding was done by the Ministry of Defense and Defense Production, particularly by Dr. Ajay Kumar, who was then the Secretary of Defense Production and now the Defense Secretary. And he gave us full support to take the program further. I'm very happy that my successor, Ramesh Saraugi, is taking the program further with all the zeal. Now you see, few things we considered that Eastern India, which was once the pioneer in the defense sector, was not getting its due. And there are few things which we highlighted, including the third corridor should come in the Eastern India. We still, I think, will recommend through this meeting to the government that there should be a third corridor, which has been mentioned by chief also and by Ayush Bhushan also that we need a third corridor, considering the pioneer role played by the Eastern India. We were having the number of factories here, so I think it will be taken note by the government. Now, friends, because it is important that the Eastern sector regain its preeminence position in the defense sector, and it had. Now, the third corridor is an issue about which the chamber is very particular and has been talking about this. Government of India has taken certain initiatives in the defense sector, particularly after Prime Minister Modi started emphasizing on the Atmanirbharta, and particularly we find that the budget policies of the Government of India, particularly the last budget, there was a lot of emphasis on the Atmanirbharta, and in particular in the area of exports. I'm very happy that in the last budget, the government has increased the capital outlay for the defense expenditure. And it opens a huge opportunity for the defense sector in Eastern India, in fact, all over the country. Government of India continues with its efforts to modernize the defense sector. Now, Government of India has also decided to lay further emphasis on the sector's indigenization, as 68% of the capital procurement has been proposed to be earmarked for the domestic industry in 22-23, which is a huge opportunity for the private sector, and where our chamber would like to play a role, how to motivate the private sector, how to get them involved in the defense sector. Although we find it very difficult because the private sector has been very, very reluctant for different regions. Now, 25% of the R&D budget has been earmarked for the industry, startups, and academia. This is also very important decision taken by the government. And I think here the private sector will come forward, will play their role, and they will be encouraged in the design and development of the military platforms, equipments in collaboration with agencies such as DRDO, OFB, and other organizations through strategic partnership. Now, some of the points have been raised by the earlier speakers, particularly Ayush Bhushan has mentioned about this. If we want to increase the exports, government will have to take two decisions. And one of them, which is very important, is a nodal center for the approval or of the exports by one agency. As is rightly mentioned, earlier, as long as OFB was there, one could operate and work through the OFB. And now there are 7 public sector units, all are working independently. There, if the private sector is required to approach for the exports to all the 7 public sector companies, I think it will create a lot of problems. The government should take some decision in this regard. And now the budget has also given some impetus to the private industries and in the export production. Now you see that from the eastern sector, there are already existing companies who are doing actively in the defense sector. Particularly, I would like to mention about the 2 companies. One is in the shipbuilding areas, and another is in engineering areas. And there they are like, and then at the same time, there's a huge, like I think Titagarh is quite active in the Navy sector also. Now, government has also taken few decisions for the simplification of the custom tariff structure for products including helicopters, parts of manned armament aircrafts. This simplified custom tariff structure will come into effect from 1st May 2022. Furthermore, announcing the sunset date of 31st March 23 for existing exemption available on the specific imports in relation to defense and internal security forces will help in reducing reliance on imports. Now, it can be really clearly observed that the center has introduced major reservations in the safeguard the interest of the domestic suppliers of defense goods. That will certainly help the industry. However, such reservations naturally put enormous responsibility on these suppliers to meet the challenges faced by the armed forces. These challenges can only be met single-handedly by the domestic players if the increase in the capital outlay is utilized for building capacity, new production facilities, increased collaborative framework with foreign OEMs, more JVs, and enhanced investment through FDI. I'd also like to briefly outline the sectoral requirement of the Indian Armed Forces for the information of the prospective defense suppliers. Firstly, the Indian Navy allocation has witnessed the highest increase by 43% of the capital budget among the three forces. This is very significant that in the Navy sector, there is a huge opportunity for private sector to come forward, and which we have seen that some of the companies in the private sector from Eastern India has really come forward. That particularly would like to mention that this warship or ships manufacturing, there are local MSMEs, particularly from the Eastern India, because engineering has been a very strong point of Eastern India from the years, that MSMEs may note that goods such as valves, fittings, pipes, distribution boards, junctions, boxes, transformers, pumps, motors, forgings and castings, capable hangers are being procured in huge quantities. And all these items have been manufactured in Eastern India for many, many years. And they should also come forward and take this initiative in this regard. Now, you see that from our chamber, I think there is a large number of members in our chamber who can take active part in the defense supplies, including the exports. Some of the companies, like they are already there, as I mentioned, like the Texmaco and the Titagarh wagons. And some of the companies have huge potentials, like whether it is Century Ply or the Rupa and Company, they can manufacture a lot of garments and all those things. And that we have our other members who can also take the advantage of this, because they have got the potentials. And now Ministry of Defense is our almost partner. They have been working us, they have been encouraging us, and now this DefExpo, which is going to take place in 2022, they are also, our chamber is a partner there. We are going there, we will participate there. Here also I would like to make an appeal that our members should come forward and try to as many as possible. And we from side of chamber would like to try to do everything possible from our side to facilitate your participation in the chamber. With these words, I would like to conclude my address and would request here Admiral Amit Bose to initiate his presentation.
Thank you, sir. Respected members of the panel and esteemed audience attending this webinar, good afternoon. It's indeed a great honor for me for having been provided an opportunity to express my thoughts on this germane topic, and I would like to sincerely thank the Ministry of Defense and Bharat Chamber of Commerce for the same. During the course of series of these webinars, various aspects of government's progressive initiatives towards facilitating improved ecosystem for indigenous defense manufacturing, be it in terms of policy directives, administrative reorganizations, budgetary allocations, or targets set for defense exports, etc., have all been recounted on multiple occasions and discussed in greater details. I would like to put forth my views on the fact that despite existence of such provisions for improving environment for indigenous defense manufacturing from Eastern India for the last 2 decades, the actual contribution has been very minimal. To speak on the aspect of rejuvenating the defense production from eastern states of modern India, let's briefly review the present economy of the states of Eastern India, namely Bihar, Jharkhand, Odisha, and West Bengal. I draw my observations from the economic survey reports which have been rendered by the respective state governments for the financial year 2021. Since COVID-19 has impacted the economy of all states of our country, I would not dwell upon its impact on the economy of these states. Bihar, with a population of about 120 million and 38 administrative districts, has made significant efforts towards reversing the historical industrial backlog. With the formation of state of Jharkhand, it has suffered major reallocation of its mineral reserves. Notwithstanding this, it has achieved a GDSP growth rate of 10.74 CAGR. Its industries are predominantly in agro, sugar, dairy, textile, and petro-based. However, it needs to be noted that the contribution of the industry sector to the GSVA has only been approximately 19%, which implies that the industry is not a significant driver of the state economy. Several new initiatives are being implemented by the state administration, like improvement of the state transport infrastructure, setting up of smart cities at Patna, Bihar Sharif, Bhagalpur, Muzaffarpur, setting up of industrial development area under BIADA, revised policies for ease of doing business like Udyog Mitra, Bihar startup policies, etc. It is also augmenting digitization through improved connectivity and multiple IT and IT-enabled projects like Data Center 2.0 and BS WAN 2.0. It's also setting up knowledge and IT parks at Bihata and Rajgir. These initiatives have enabled the state to win the coveted Digital India Award 2020. Jharkhand, with a population of about 33 million and 24 administrative districts, is one of the richest mineral zones in the world, with huge reserves of minerals like iron ore, copper, coal, as well as rare earth material. Their industries are primarily again in the domain of mining, iron and steel, and cement based. It has sustained a GDP growth rate of 8.94% CAGR. Again, the contribution of industry sector to GSVA from this state is only 29%. Key initiatives to promote industrial production include planned industrial corridor for Govindpur, Jamtara, Dumka and Sahibganj belt, dedicated IT hubs, industrial and logistic parks at Avantipur, Palamu, Dhanbad, Bokaro, Singhbhum, etc. All of this under the Jharkhand Industrial Investment Promotion Policy. These efforts have ranked the state as 5th in the ease of doing business as per DIPP's 2019 ranking. It regularly conducts boot camps as part of Jharkhand startup projects, and 8 cities are being transformed under the Amrit mission. Talking about Odisha, it has a population of 47 million and 30 administrative districts. It has sustained an economic growth rate of 7.51% since 2012-13. It's also a minerals-rich zone, accounting for almost 25% of total mineral production in the country, with huge reserves of chromite, nickel, and iron ore. With significant investment in renewable energy-based power generation, it has achieved 100% electrification in the state. It has major ports at Paradip and minor ports at Dharma and Gopalpur. With major industries in the domain of mining, iron and steel, aluminum and petrochemicals, it has sustained a GDP growth rate of 4.8% CAGR, with a contribution of industry sector to the GSVA being approximately 36.3%, which is incidentally the highest for amongst the states of Eastern India. The state administration has been at the forefront of facilitating greater industrial production under the aegis of Mo Sarkar program, adopting a 5T paradigm of technology, teamwork, transparency, timeliness, all leading to transformation. The Industrial Promotion and Investment Corporation of Odisha has been their flagship initiative, promote Make in Odisha and MSMEs. Electronic manufacturing clusters near Bhubaneswar, Software Technology Park at Behrampur, and SEZ at Paradip and Gopalpur are all being established towards augmenting industrial production. Lastly, moving on to West Bengal, with a population of approximately 91 million and 23 administrative districts, it is the 6th largest state in terms of economic size. It is also the 9th state in terms of mineral production, with coal contributing approximately 97% of the output. While major industries are in the domain of mining, iron and steel, petrochemicals, locomotives, tea and leather, it has sustained a GDP growth rate of 12.62% CAGR. However, the contribution of industry sector to the GSVA, even in this state, is only about 19.7%. It has a dedicated shipbuilding yard and armament and ammunition facilities with limited MRO capabilities on helicopters that pertain to the defense sector. The state has recently accorded greater focus to industrial development under the aegis of Shilpa Bandhu, with dedicated state investment facilitation centers for single window clearance of new proposals and concise policies on facilitating startups. IT electronics and logistic parks, as well as electric vehicles, are all being promoted by the state government. A technological development and adaptation center
under the West Bengal Science and Technology Council, as well as an entrepreneur and innovation park under IIM Kolkata have also been established. Growth centers have also been established under West Bengal WBIDC for electronics, software technology, export promotion, etc. Industrial parks are being set up at Haldia, Kolkata, Asansol, Durgapur, Panagarh, etc. It is therefore evident that the industry in all 4 states of eastern India are typically concentrated in the domain of mining, metallurgy, petrochemicals, and agro. These states have very few industries pertaining to defense sector, and this merits rejuvenation of defense production from the region. While defense shipbuilding industry with its own captive ecosystem of tier 2 and tier 3 vendors as well as MSMEs is already established in the region, with greater thrust being given to inland waterways, there is ample scope for further augmentation of the shipbuilding industry, both from design and manufacturing aspects for defense as well as commercial mercantile applications. And this should become a primary focus for the state as well as the central government to augment this critical national capability. This project could be progressed concurrently with the ongoing developmental efforts for port infrastructure by the states of West Bengal and Odisha. A well-established shipbuilding industry could then augment its effort towards building ships for other nations on competitive basis, furthering the national mission for increasing defense exports. While all states of Eastern India have adequately skilled HR capital in domains of engineering and technical proficiency, the current level of exposure of the local industry and MSME to the requirement of defense production ecosystem has been extremely restricted. There is clearly a need to address this lacuna, wherein the central and state governments have to jointly augment the environment for defense industrial production, creating greater awareness among the industry houses and MSMEs about the forecasted requirements, scope of order quantities, underlying technologies and engineering aspects, need for ensuring reliability and quality assurance throughout the entire cycle of production as well as life cycle product support mechanism. Addressing obsolescence management, configuration control, and mid-life technological upgradations for typical defense systems as part of equipment PLCS are also need to be ingrained in the process being followed by these industries. The academia in this region should also take up pioneering R&D and innovation in domains related to defense applications. All these aspects could easily piggyback upon the greater thrust being provided by the state administration to promote generic industrial development in the respective states, utilizing the captive expertise and the reach of industry associations like BCC, CII, FICCI, etc. The draft policy on MSME, which has been promulgated by the government yesterday, and its 8 action plans could also be adopted to promote MSME participation in defense sector. While India proudly boasts to be the 3rd largest ecosystem for startups, none of the Indian states figure in the top 10 in terms of numbers. We need to emulate the practices and processes followed by leading cities like Delhi, Bangalore, and Mumbai. Similar approach also needs to be urgently adopted for guiding and issuance of IPRs and patents so that the young minds can pursue cutting-edge technological R&D and innovations without bothering about financial rewards, thereby furthering the objective of a knowledge-based economy. It is very obvious that we cannot expect the defense production and exports to grow proverbially overnight, given the present status of industry in the region. The primary objective, thus, should be to promote rapid industrial growth in few of the latest technological domains in the first instance, the need for which has been clearly accentuated by the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, wherein shortages of critical industrial components is affecting several industrial establishments worldwide. Efforts in this direction that have already been initiated by all the states, as elucidated earlier, are the steps in the right direction. Overall, in my opinion, we need to draw out graded plans towards achieving the desired objective of rejuvenation of defense production and exports from the eastern state of India and act upon them through concerted efforts. These could be highly classified into focused short-term 1 to 2 years period, a medium-term 2 to 5 years period, and a long-term 5 to 10 years plans. Implementing these proposals would warrant a greater synergy between defense services, industry, DRDO, DGQA, as well as the central and state governments. The short-term plan should target inviting leading industrial houses for setting up commercial industries in the eastern region, conducting regional industrial expositions to enable better interaction of the local industry with other industries of the nation, undertaking extensive propaganda of ease of doing business to encourage industrial investment, supporting ancillary units as Tier 2 and Tier 3 vendors, and lastly, encouraging R&D, startups, and innovations in emerging and disrupting technologies amongst the youth through academia and competitions. The National iSTEM initiative is a right step in this direction. The medium-term plan could target the following objectives: a jointmanship approach by the eastern states of India to establish and promote an environment conducive to industrial production in the region, particularly for cutting-edge and disruptive technologies like lithium-ion batteries, semiconductors and electronics, AI, virtual reality, big data analytics, robotics, UAVs, 5G and satellite communication, cybersecurity, cryptography, and blockchain, etc. A healthy ecosystem of industry and MSME could then venture into the defense sector with requisite hand-holding during the development phase of new systems. Focus on indigenization of negative import and positive indigenization lists which have been promulgated by the government with the technical specifications which have been shared by the service headquarters in open domain. Create greater awareness and ensure strict quality compliance throughout the PLCS process, including encouragement of self-certification by the local industries. We would also propose formation of technology-specific consortia and incubation centers to address developmental efforts in niche technology areas. It has already been mentioned that there should be a defense corridor set up in the eastern India. A long-term plan would aim to achieve the following objectives, including those at national level as required. Create a Defense Technology Commission to facilitate interaction between relevant ministries of the central and state government, BCC, CII, FICCI, DRDO, academia, quality assurance establishment, leading industry partners and defense services to deliberate and review requirements of new generation systems. Setting up of more industrial parks, hubs, and SEZs for industrial production, duly supplemented with concurrent development of civil infrastructure to attract professional talent from across the nation. Facilitate setting up of major defense R&D and industries, which includes DPSUs or private industries in the region. Take up component manufacturing, obsolescence management, system and platform level integration, as well as MRO, starting with contracts for defense systems of our neighboring nations. Most importantly, there is an urgent need to set up an organization akin to the DARPA of the USA that encourages and guides defense innovations, making pivotal investment in disruptive and breakthrough technologies for national security. I'm very sanguine that the above measures, if implemented in a time-bound manner, would surely help us achieve our desired objectives. To conclude, I would like to quote that it is always advisable to light a candle than curse the darkness. Thank you and Jai Hind. I request Shri Ajay Dubey, Director of Planning and Coordination, Department of Defense Production, Ministry of Defense, to say a few words.
Good afternoon, one and all. This is Ajay Dubey, Deputy Director from Department of Defense Production. As we all know, Ministry of Defense, Government of India is hosting 12th edition of prestigious biennial defense exhibition, that is DefExpo 2022, from 10th of March to 13th March at Gandhinagar, Gujarat. So in the run-up to DefExpo, a series of 8 webinars are being conducted starting from 20th of Jan 2022 to 24th of Feb 2022. So this is the 7th webinar conducted by Bharat Chamber of Commerce in collaboration with Department of Defense Production. Prior to this, other webinars were conducted covering the topics of opportunities and way ahead for India's role in global defense manufacturing, the kind of future warfare, the synergies of policies of Government of India for ease of doing business, building ecosystem for advanced technology-based systems, addressing gaps in defense production, the recent QA initiatives in the field of military aviation, and today, one of the finest topic, rejuvenating the defense production and exports from Eastern India. I'm thankful to the President of Bharat Chamber of Commerce, Sri Ramesh Kumar Saraugi sir, for organizing this webinar. I'm thankful to all the eminent speakers present here for their valuable suggestions. I hope all these suggestions by our eminent speakers in the webinar will go ahead and further the collaboration between the DDP and Bharat Chamber of Commerce. Due to the efforts of these collaborations, we will see a long way in implementing the suggestions by the eminent speakers. I will not take much time because already we are running out of schedule. I will request Mr. N.G. Khetan sir to give a formal vote of thanks, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dubey. It has been a real pleasure to hear the eminent speakers present today. In fact, it was at the initiative of Air Chief Marshal Raha, Ayush Bhushan, Dr. Chakravarti, and Mr. Sitaram Sharma, my past president. They felt that it was necessary that we organize a symposium and including an exhibition for the defense production way back just prior to COVID had set in 2018-19. Because I think we had a vision in our mind, and that was that the military power, like any other power, cannot be borrowed. It has to be acquired from one's own strength. Otherwise, we become others' surrogate. And they had this vision that the time is going to come when we will, and India will have to go for its necessary defense production. And how true it has come that today, under the Atmanirbhar Bharat program, 68% of the defense capital outlay has been towards the domestic production. So therefore, we had this vision that the Ministry of Defense and your department to come out with Tarkib, where they would like now that the hardwares are produced in India. And as recently as I was studying yesterday, that on 14th of January, the Indian Army has placed an order of 149.5 crores order with a private sector making drone, that is Idea Forge. So therefore, you are now encouraging the private sector also to go for defense production. This is so encouraging for us because today West Bengal is a hub of MSME sector. We have the largest number of MSME in West Bengal. We have all the mill wells, we have all the ports, we have the rivers. Everything is there. Once we were a pioneer in the defense production, and it is high time that we realize that the government would decide to give the defense production, indigenous dish production, a push, and that is exactly what has happened in this budget. So I'm sure that the West Bengal will have a nominal place in your scheme of things in promoting the defense production in West Bengal. So on behalf of my chamber, I think it is a matter of great honor for our chamber in recognition of endeavor in promoting defense indigenization since 2018, that it has received the opportunity to participate in your prestigious DefExpo 2022 organized by the Ministry of Defense, Government of India in Gandhinagar from 10th to 12th of March 2022. And I'm very happy that our chamber has been recognized for their participation and what they are doing for promoting defense production, particularly in Eastern India. Sir, I'm sure our chamber will be addressing the seminar on pricing strategy for defense exports. How can India acquire a competitive edge over her peers on 11th of March? We are looking forward for this valuable opportunity. With these words, I would like to propose a hearty vote of thanks to Air Marshal Raha, Ayush Bhushan, Dr. Chakravarti, Rear Admiral Bose, Mr. Sharma, Mr. Ajay Dubey, and all participants who are present today. And may I request all of them to carry this vote of thanks with acclamation, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you all eminent speakers and all the participants. A lot of thanks to everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. See you in Gandhinagar.
Sure, sir. See you.
Yeah.
See you there, sir.
Yeah. Thank you. जबकि साला आजकल होता है गांधीनगर में नीचे से ये बात हमको बोला 4 बजे आपका टर्न आएगा, आया साला 4:30 बजे।